Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. Today I'm with Cullen Menke. I couldn't be more excited today to have a conversation with Cullen, somebody who's become a really good friend, and in some ways he's like a son. So Cullen, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on. And this is exciting.
Yeah, sure is.
It's going to be an impactful podcast for people.
Yeah. So Cullen has quite a story, quite a journey. And so we're going to hit on a few parts of his journey. We'll probably have to bring him back on again because he's just got such an amazing story. So I want to just give a quick high level, but we're going to touch on a little bit of your childhood and your decision to become a teacher. Went on to graduate from MSU, and then ended up in Hungary. And that's going to be a really fun part of our story. So, and that's when I met you a few years back. Why don't you start us off? Just tell us a little bit about life as a kid and how you chose to be an English teacher. And
Lots of ground to cover here.
Yeah.
But yeah, starting from the top, I mean, just grew up in a small town, not too far from Lansing. You know, I was all over the place as a kid. You know, I wasn't the best student. Really loved sports. Really loved being social.
Yeah.
Always wanted to be in what was ever happening. You know, I never wanted to be left out.
Okay.
And so, you know, growing up in a neighborhood, like you have your buddies, you have your crew of guys that you get into trouble, you ding dong ditch, and you know, you mess around a little bit. So growing up in a small town neighborhood, you know, there were some things at home, I would say. You know, my parents did their best throughout their marriage, but you know, ultimately it didn't work, you know, and so there was some definite parts of the childhood years where that was a challenge.
Some difficult years.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I really leaned into my friend group and kind of just tried to get out of the house as much as I could.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I grew into my teenage years, the ding dong ditches turned into, you know, blackout drunk weekends and just messing all kinds of stuff up for myself and really just living in shame.
Yeah.
You know. So, I mean, how did I transition to be a teacher is really, you know, that's a lot to walk through, but ultimately it was, you know, just realizing a few years after finishing high school that it would have just been such an amazing thing to have a teacher, have a mentor in my life throughout those years.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously just loving the way you can connect with a young person on the sports field. I just set out to get after the MSU to be a teacher and a coach. So
so you graduated from high school, even in the midst of all your, you know, some of your crazy nights, and you survived all that, right? So as a parent, you know, you kind of you think about your kids and you think about, oh my gosh, how did they survive? But then you go back to your childhood, and we all had some. But you had a significant transition. So you went off to MSU, and there was a point in your life where you kind of made some decisions that you wanted to do life a little bit different. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't sustain a lifestyle of getting hammered all the time and grabbing whatever temporary escape device that presents itself in your path.
So you're talking about escape. So you're saying that like you were using drinking and, you know, drugs and things to kind of escape from the pain that was in you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what happened? Like, how did you decide? How did you stop doing that? What was the impetus to put an end to that and then start your off into getting into being an English teacher?
You know, coming to a place where I would say it's really just coming to the end of yourself, where you hit a crossroads and you just realize, I mean, it is really the choice between death and life. It is. If I keep going this route, then there's just no chance for a marriage and a family, because, you know, how in the heck do you bring others into a life of this much dysfunction?
Yeah.
And also just coming to grips with some of my superpowers and realizing how a lot of the pain that was driving me to want to escape, it's just because I didn't have a clear mind and and a whole heart to be able to approach, um, to be able to stand sober and clear eyed, to be able to put my cape on.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
giver, I'm a helper.
Yeah.
I want to help people put things back together, and
Yeah.
you know, and so yeah, I had a couple crossroad moments, but I mean, I remember that. I just remember a distinct season, around 3 months, where I just decided, looked myself in the mirror and was really struggling with hopelessness, and just decided, even if I never experience hope, the kind of hope that you see in the movies,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm not going to be a drunk searching for hope. I'm not
Okay.
going to be an addict searching for hope.
Yeah.
So I just set on a path to say each and every day I'm going to take seriously the commitments that I make to myself to be clear-eyed and wholehearted, and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. And it's interesting when you make those kind of decisions, how much things like hope and joy and peace
Hmm.
and love start to, you almost see them for what they always have been,
Yeah.
but that you just didn't have the glasses on.
Yeah.
You couldn't see them for what they were because of the cycles that you're in. And
Right. Right.
so yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be someone that took care of others and
Yeah.
laid my life down for others.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So the idea of being an English teacher then was kind of born out of that desire to help be a part of people's lives. I mean, you wanted to teach because not because you loved the English language so much as that you do love the English language, but you also loved kids
hmm
and wanted to be able to be that mentor or that parent figure that could love a kid that's going through tough times, or even just love kids and helping keep them on the track, right? So you made that
Absolutely.
decision to go to MSU, you graduated, you got your degree, and now you're teaching. But then during the summers, you were doing something, you came across a program and ended up overseas. Tell us about that. So, bring
Yeah.
bring us on that journey.
Yeah. I mean, in my journey of clear eyes and whole heart, uh, you know, the being a part of a church, non-denominational church in Lansing, was a huge part about that. I never forget when I snuck into the church hungover and crawled up to the back row and heard the acoustic and the worship music playing, and just cried my eyes out. I didn't understand any of this stuff. I mean, I've heard people talk about God and this and that, but that was a place of hope for me. And so I
Yeah.
just kept going back. For a while I didn't tell anybody what I was doing on Sundays. It was my journey. It was precious to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, this pastor came up to me one day and was just kind of like, "You ever left the country?" And I said, "No, I don't have a passport. I don't have any money in my bank account. How am I going to do that?" And he's like, "Well, I think it would be really great for you to just consider going on doing some English teaching abroad in the summers. I think it'd be really good for you to work with some kids, some teenagers." And I saved up, and that was about when I met Sarah, my wife, and she helped me get started on that. I just loved it. Started working with Roma gypsy kids, and I think I went back like 7 out of 8 years in a row.
Really? So you're teaching all year long, and then you are given your summers to go to Hungary to teach English as a second language. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. And I hadn't become a teacher at the beginning, of going on those summer trips. But that was what really made it super clear that I wanted to focus on becoming a teacher. So it was
Yeah.
like before, during, and after. Yeah, I was doing some teaching and going on the summers. And
Oh, so you were still in school,
yeah,
going to college when you made this first
exactly.
trip to Hungary. Never been out of the country.
Yeah.
And well, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that sounds like your first time there. What were some of the impacts
Oh my gosh.
that really have formed your heart for doing
hmm
work like that?
Well, I mean, just getting out of your context and being immersed in a space that's, well, extremely different, much older than our country, and also um having the opportunity to get into just impoverished areas
Yeah.
where kids were born into situations that they didn't.
Paint that picture for us a little bit, because that's when I entered yours. You were working in one of these small towns, I mean, like 2,000
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
If you haven't been to Hungary, which I haven't
Mhm.
been, paint that picture a little bit for us.
Just very, very, very bad environments, very dangerous. Lots of poor side street drugs, cooking stuff up, houses blowing up, just crazy stuff like that. Really bad old infrastructure, so walls coming down, dirt floors. Um, babies aren't developing well because the moms aren't setting them down to learn to crawl. They're holding them all the time because it's
Wow.
just so dirty. The water's extremely, extremely bad. So
So really poor.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a bad setup, and more than that, it's just that's the generational cycles have really, really made an impact. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
get in there and you start talking with the kids, you realize like their parents are still kids. Like
Mm-hmm.
you got 6 and 7 year olds whose parents are 18, 19. Like they hadn't. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's real. Kids are getting pregnant at 13, 14 years old. Like
Wow.
not everybody, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different place, and the boys worked a lot with the young men over there because culturally they just kind of dip out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't take responsibility
Hmm.
for the kiddos, and they don't support you know their spouses.
Yeah.
They think they can just run around, and so there's just a lot in
Yeah.
that. There's a lot, and they're poor, so nutrition. It's chips and pop and energy drinks, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. So just not a lot to be excited about for
no.
the future, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
speaking of hope, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
gosh.
They're looking. These kids are looking through the lens. These fifth, sixth, seventh grade kids, even high school
Hmm.
kids are looking through the lens of their parents, their friends of their parents. It's just not. There's nothing
Right.
that exciting to look forward to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
living an impoverished life.
Yeah, like for example, when I first started teaching, I would ask the kids, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Now looking back, I mean, just the dumbest question to ask these kids.
Yeah.
When you ask, "What do you want to be when you grow
There
up?"
are
Like,
no dumb questions, Colin, but you happen to find the one that was
oh, I
the
found the
dumb.
one. Yeah, and they're just looking at me with blank stares, like, "What do you mean, man?" And then
Huh.
this is just a journey of when I was living in Hungary,
Yeah.
teaching every day, 7th and 8th graders, coming to the end of their experience at the school I was teaching at. It was, yeah, it's helping them in bite-sized pieces to dream
Wow.
without saying, "Hey," without asking questions like that.
Right. That are just
So,
so open ended. In the United States would be understood. Everybody knows somebody that came from nothing and
mhm,
made something of their life, or
yeah,
their parents have been successful or whatever. So
right,
not a lot of that to look around and find in this village of 2,000 people that's impoverished.
right.
Wow. So your heart came alive and you went your first year, and now you've committed and you've been going here several summers. You graduated from MSU. You're now teaching as an English teacher, and you get married to your wife, Sarah, who's an amazing, amazing woman.
Yeah.
And you guys are great for each other.
Hmm.
So she's also a PA, and somehow you guys have a afternoon conversation one day over lunch, and you're like, "Hey, what do you think about this?"
Yeah, pretty much.
So tell us what this was,
What
because
this
this is
was.
crazy. Not many people would leave and do what you guys did. So yeah, give us a high
Yeah.
level on that.
Yeah. I mean, the first date we ever went on, we talked about going abroad and making a difference and doing something before we grow our family.
Yeah,
It was something that really united us and got us excited. Now, this whole trip to Hungary was really us exploring: are we travel junkies, or do we really truly want to make an impact
yeah,
on a global scale?
yeah,
And so that was a lot to work out. I think ultimately we had made a decision. We spent the season before we got married really praying about where and what we're gonna do.
yeah.
And this was not too long before COVID. I mean, it was really the year 2 years before COVID happened. And
Mm-hmm.
we moved to Hungary during COVID. I mean, it was like when things started to just loosen up. Like we were
2020.
2021, I believe it
Okay.
was. Um, but I mean, Sarah, Sarah loves to have things a bit more planned out. So I really always tell people like this was way bigger of a sacrifice for her than it was for me.
Yeah, yeah.
We both were jacked up about this, but they don't have PAs in Hungary. You know, she would go around the village and look at kiddos and families, but
Mhm.
she couldn't practice there. So
Yeah.
she left her profession behind. I mean,
Wow.
I got to live out my dream, and
Yeah.
um, but she grew in so many ways while we were
Well,
there.
you both did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're very different people now, and our marriage is. I mean, I wouldn't suggest for everybody to take 3 years and go live in a poor Roma village in Eastern Europe
Yeah.
to strengthen your marriage before you have a kiddo. But
Right.
I mean, I think since our little one who's about to turn 1 in 2 weeks,
So excited.
we got pregnant with Rory while we were still there.
Yeah. So you guys are over there, and your dream was to build this coffee shop and basically a youth center.
Yeah.
And that's when we met. We had a random meeting at your father-in-law's house, Tim's house. We ended up happened to know the same guy in Hungary. I didn't know him very well. I had just met him once through a church connection here in Lansing, and that set you and I looking at each other in the front yard of your house that day, like what just happened. I mean, you and I connected. We realized that we had some similar connections. You were in town looking to go raise more funds because it had gotten so expensive because of the Ukraine war that's still going on.
Yeah.
So everything had doubled. COVID had hit. The coffee shop wasn't even going to be able to be finished. And then there was this upstairs project that hadn't been on the radar. So you and Sarah had a couple years left, or was it a year left, and you were trying to get this project done. So, and that's when when I looked at you, I was like, man, you had said something about needing some builders to come to Hungary and help. I'm like, I can't go. It's way too busy. I got, all of my kids and high school and all that stuff going on. But what happened was the beginning of something pretty miraculous, really, that day of you looking at me and saying, let's grab lunch. And we went and had breakfast together, and you told me more about the mission. And so we were able to partner with you and design that upper level, and
That was incredible.
then raise the funds for it. And so bring us along on what happened, and ultimately, how did you end up back here at Custom Built? So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was such an incredible moment. It's like you drove up in a white truck with the word builder on the side, built, but and, I mean, just from that moment on, it was like I just knew that there's a reason for that meeting, and I didn't know what it was.
Right.
Even after the funding and all the things that went in, it's been unbelievable it was like I was supposed to be working alongside Michael Flory.
Yeah.
And working with Custom Built, whatever that means.
Right.
It was so cool that the next step for my journey was laid out before we were still 2 years away from coming back.
Yeah.
And I mean, the cafe got built. It got finished.
Yeah.
The youth center got built. It got finished.
And you sent me some pictures of Thanksgiving dinner.
We had some parties.
Before you guys came back in December, you guys were just finishing. The final paint was drying.
Yeah.
And you were like in a building project. That was
the final weeks. We ran it right to the end of for when we came back.
Wow.
2 Christmases ago. So
yeah.
I mean, we could probably fill up 15 episodes on just that story. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm just so grateful for just that moment happening, and it was amazing, all that Custom Built and you all did. And it's been awesome to be a part of Custom Built since I've come back this past year.
Yeah, it has.
And the journey continues, right?
Well, now you're building and designing homes for remodeling homes for people in the Lansing area, and continuing to build that skill and craft.
Yep.
Simultaneously, you're still in touch and staying connected and helping the Roma gypsies in their journey of really building families. And so super amazing story, really inspiring, Cullen. You are an amazing man, and just been so fun to have you as a part of the team, and super grateful to have you on the show today. It's super inspiring story. And I would say just one takeaway for me is you don't know what the futures holds for you.
Mhm.
I think that you and Sarah have been in a prime example of just going with the intuition, what you're feeling, and then testing it out and not putting any guardrails on it, meaning that,
Mhm.
you came back and you could have went back to be an English teacher, but now you're a builder,
Mhm.
and you're doing amazing work in a different realm, but still allowing you guys to continue the dream of impacting the world
Mhm.
through your mission.